He's turning blue! Look at him! You're killing my son!" The scream tore through the pressurized silence of first class, shattering the calm of Flight 402. Tobias Montclair wasn't a man who raised his voice. He was a man who ended careers with a whisper. But watching his 16-year-old son Archer clawing at his throat while the flight attendant, Alina Moore, stood over him with the snatched oxygen mask in her hand, broke something primal inside him. "Sit down, sir, or we will restrain you," Alina barked, her eyes cold, clutching the mask like a trophy. "He's faking it for an upgrade. I know his type." The hiss of the air vents sounded like a death rattle. Tobias froze, his eyes locking onto hers with a terrifying, icy promise. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a declaration of war. The cabin of the Horizon Air Boeing 787 Dreamliner was bathed in the soft, artificial twilight of the mood lighting, a feature the airline marketed as tranquility in the skies. For Tobias Montclair, it usually worked. He was a man who appreciated silence and precision. At 52, Tobias had built an empire in logistics and private equity, moving mountains without ever needing to touch a shovel. He wore his success quietly, a bespoke charcoal suit that didn't scream money but whispered power to those who knew the language of fabric. Beside him sat Archer Lennox, his 16-year-old son. Archer was the soft contrast to Tobias's sharp edges. With his noise-canceling headphones resting around his neck and a sketchbook open on his lap, Archer looked every bit the artistic teenager lost in his own world. He had Tobias's height, but his late mother's gentle eyes. They were flying from JFK to London Heathrow for an art exhibition where Archer's sketches had been selected for a youth showcase. It was supposed to be a celebration. The trouble began 90 minutes into the flight, somewhere over the Atlantic. Archer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He tapped his chest, a subtle rhythmic thumping that Tobias recognized immediately. "Chest tight?" Tobias asked, his voice low, leaning in. Archer nodded, his breath hitching slightly. "Yeah, just a bit. The air, it feels thin." Tobias didn't panic. Archer's asthma was severe, but managed. They had protocols. "Use the Inogen," Tobias said, pointing to the FAA-approved portable oxygen concentrator tucked neatly under the seat in front of Archer. It was a top-of-the-line medical device, fully charged and cleared by the airline days in advance. Archer reached down, his movements growing sluggish. The color was already draining from his cheeks, leaving an ashen undertone beneath his dark skin. He pulled the device up, placed the cannula in his nose, and pressed the power button. The machine hummed to life, a soft, rhythmic whir-click that usually signaled relief. But relief didn't come fast enough. Archer gasped, his chest heaving against his hoodie. "Take a deep breath, son. Slow," Tobias coached, his hand firm on Archer's shoulder. That was when the curtain to the galley whipped open. Alina Moore, the lead flight attendant for first class, marched down the aisle. Alina was a woman who wore her authority like armor. Her uniform was impeccable, not a crease in sight, her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it pulled at the corners of her eyes. She had been watching them since boarding, watching with a specific kind of suspicion that Tobias had seen 1,000 times before. It was the look of someone searching for a reason to be offended. She stopped at their row, looming over them. "Sir, you need to turn that device off immediately." Tobias looked up, confused but polite. "It's a medical device, an oxygen concentrator. He's having an asthma attack." "It's making a noise," Alina said, her voice dripping with disdain. "And it's not on the manifest I have. We don't allow unapproved electronics during meal service." "It is approved," Tobias said, his voice hardening slightly. "I cleared it with the disability desk 3 days ago. Check your iPad." Archer let out a wheezing cough, a wet, desperate sound. He gripped the armrests, his knuckles turning gray. "I don't need to check anything," Alina snapped. She reached over, violating the personal space that first-class tickets commanded, and pressed the power button on the machine. The humming stopped. "Turn it back on," Tobias said, the pleasantry vanishing from his tone. "Now." "Don't you dare speak to me like that," Alina retorted, straightening up. "If he can argue, he can breathe. I've seen kids play this game for sympathy before. He's disturbing the other passengers." Archer's eyes went wide. He clutched his throat. The lack of supplemental oxygen, combined with the panic of the confrontation, was sending his bronchial tubes into a spasm. He wasn't getting air. "He's not arguing. He's dying." Tobias unbuckled his seatbelt, reaching for the machine to restart it. Alina moved faster than he expected. She grabbed the cannula tubing, the plastic line feeding air into Archer's nose, and yanked. The plastic ripped from Archer's face. The sudden force snapped his head back. He made a choking sound, a silent scream of air hunger. That was the moment the world tilted. "He's turning blue! Look at him! You're killing my son!" Tobias roared, the sound tearing through the cabin. Passengers turned. A woman in 3A gasped, dropping her champagne flute. "Sit down, sir, or we will restrain you," Alina barked, her eyes cold, clutching the tubing like a trophy. "He's faking it. I know his type." Tobias ignored her. He looked at his son. Archer's eyes were rolling back, his lips turning a terrifying shade of violet. Tobias didn't waste time arguing with the woman anymore. He lunged past her into the aisle, screaming toward the cockpit. "Is there a doctor? We need a doctor now!" Alina grabbed Tobias's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. "You are assaulting a flight crew member. That is a felony. I will have you zip-tied." Tobias spun on her. He didn't touch her, but he leaned in so close she could see the flecks of gold in his furious eyes. "If my son dies," he whispered, a sound more terrifying than his scream, "there will be no place on this earth you can hide from me. Get away from him." It was a new voice. Adira Knight. Adira, a woman in her 30s sitting across the aisle, had unbuckled and was already at Archer's side. She wasn't a doctor, but she was a mother, and she knew what suffocation looked like. She grabbed the oxygen concentrator from the floor where Alina had knocked it. "Don't touch that equipment!" Alina shrieked. "Shut up!" Adira yelled back, slamming the power button. She shoved the cannula back toward Archer's face, but his hands were flailing, his body in full panic mode. "Help him!" Tobias shouted, trying to push past Alina, who was now physically blocking him with her body, acting as a human shield for her own ego. "Captain has been alerted," Alina sneered. "We are diverting, and you are going to jail." Suddenly, a man from row 4 rushed forward, Weston Harrington. He was tall, dressed in a casual blazer, but he moved with military precision. He didn't speak to Alina. He simply used his shoulder to gently but firmly displace her, breaking her blockade. "I'm an EMT." Weston lied. He wasn't. He was a crisis management attorney, but he knew he needed authority. He knelt beside Archer. "He's in respiratory arrest. We need the onboard O2 bottles, the big ones, now." Alina hesitated. "Get the damn tank," Weston roared. Shamed, or perhaps realizing she had gone too far, another flight attendant, a junior girl with terrified eyes, ran to the overhead bin and pulled down the yellow emergency oxygen bottle. She handed it to Weston. Weston clapped the mask over Archer's face and cranked the valve. Tobias held his son's hand, feeling the cold, clammy sweat. "Stay with me, Archer. Breathe. Just breathe." For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Archer's chest seized. He was drowning in air. Then a gasp, a ragged, desperate intake of oxygen. Then another. The color began to creep back, agonizingly slow. Archer's eyes focused, locking onto Tobias. Tears streamed down the boy's face. He was terrified. Tobias slumped against the bulkhead, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He looked up at Alina Moore. She was standing a few feet away, adjusting her scarf, her face composed into a mask of haughty indifference. She wasn't sorry. She was annoyed. She picked up the cabin interphone. "Captain, the situation is contained. But we have a level 4 threat in first class. I want police waiting at the gate." Tobias closed his eyes. Let them come, he thought. Let them all come. The diversion to Boston Logan International Airport took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of heavy silence in the first-class cabin. Archer had stabilized, breathing rhythmically from the emergency tank Weston held, but he was exhausted, his body limp. Tobias didn't speak. He didn't look at Alina. He pulled out his phone, connected to the onboard Wi-Fi, and sent a single text message to his personal assistant in New York. Initiate Protocol 0. Target, Horizon Air, Flight 402. Get me everything on a flight attendant named Alina Moore. When the wheels touched the tarmac, the plane didn't taxi to a gate. It stopped on the apron, far from the terminal. The isolation was deliberate. It was a power move by the airline. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot's voice crackled, sounding apologetic but firm. "We have been met by local authorities due to a security incident on board. Please remain seated." The front door opened. Cold Boston air rushed in, smelling of jet fuel and rain. 4 officers from the Massachusetts State Police boarded. They looked serious, hands resting near their belts. Alina Moore stepped forward immediately. She pointed a manicured finger at Tobias. "That's him, the aggressor, and the boy. They refused crew instructions, assaulted me, and created a biological hazard panic." Biological hazard panic? The lie was so audacious, Tobias almost laughed. The lead officer, a burly sergeant with a weary face, walked up to row 1. "Sir, step out of the seat. Slowly." "My son needs medical attention," Tobias said calmly. He didn't stand up yet. "He just suffered a near-fatal hypoxic event because that woman removed his medical equipment." "We'll sort that out," the sergeant said. "But right now, the captain wants you off the plane. You're trespassing." Tobias looked at Archer. "Can you walk, son?" Archer nodded weakly. "I think so. Dad, everyone is looking." "Head up, Archer," Tobias said, his voice steel. "You did nothing wrong." "We do not walk with our heads down." Tobias stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He reached into the overhead bin and grabbed his leather weekender bag. He helped Archer stand. As they moved into the aisle, Alina Moore smirked. It was a subtle thing, a twitch of the corner of her mouth, but Tobias saw it. She leaned in as he passed. "Maybe next time fly coach," she whispered. "You people clearly don't know how to behave up here." Tobias stopped. The police officer put a hand on his back to push him forward, but Tobias was like a statue. He turned his head slowly to Alina. "What is your name?" Tobias asked. "Alina Moore," she said, flashing her badge. "Make sure you spell it right for the complaint you're never going to win." "Moore," Tobias repeated, tasting the word. "I won't forget it." He walked off the plane, his hand on Archer's back. At the bottom of the mobile stairs, a squad car and an ambulance waited. The paramedics immediately swarmed Archer, checking his vitals. The police separated Tobias, guiding him toward the cruiser. "Am I under arrest?" Tobias asked. "Detained," the sergeant said. "Interfering with a flight crew is a federal offense, buddy. Depending on what the feds say, you might be looking at a long night." As they were loading Archer into the ambulance, Weston Harrington, the man who had helped them, came down the stairs. He had also been kicked off. "Hey!" Weston shouted to the cops. "I'm his legal counsel. You don't question him without me." Tobias looked at Weston, surprised. "You don't have to do this." Weston adjusted his blazer. He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to the sergeant. "Weston Harrington, senior partner at Harrington, Vane and Associates. If you put that man in handcuffs based on the testimony of a flight attendant who just committed attempted manslaughter, I will personally see to it that your precinct is buried in so much litigation you'll be filing paperwork until the sun burns out." The sergeant looked at the card, then at Weston's expensive watch, then at Tobias's calm demeanor. The dynamic shifted. These weren't unruly tourists. "He rides in the ambulance with the kid," the sergeant decided, pivoting. "We'll take statements at the hospital, but the FBI is already on their way." Tobias nodded at Weston. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Weston said, climbing into the back of the ambulance with them. "Horizon Air is already spinning this. I checked Twitter on the way down. Someone leaked a video, but it's edited. It starts after she took the mask, when you were yelling. They're painting you as an unhinged passenger who attacked a stewardess." Tobias sat on the bench in the ambulance, watching the paramedics put an oxygen mask on Archer. His son looked small, fragile. Tobias took out his phone. He opened the news app. There it was, trending already. Hashtag unruly passenger forces emergency landing in Boston. He scrolled down. The comments were vile. Animals acting up again. Why can't people just follow rules? Ban him for life. Tobias turned off the screen. He looked at Weston. "They want a villain," Tobias said softly. "They have one," Weston replied. "You." Tobias shook his head. He reached over and brushed a piece of lint off Archer's jacket. "No. They have awakened a monster. They just don't know it yet." He looked at Weston. "You said you're a lawyer?" "The best in D.C.? Weston grinned. "Good," Tobias said. "I don't want to sue them for money. I have money." "What do you want then?" Tobias looked out the back window of the ambulance as the flashing lights illuminated the rainy tarmac. "I want to buy the airline," Tobias said. Weston blinked. "Excuse me?" "I want to buy it," Tobias repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. "And then I want to fire her, personally. But not before I take everything she thinks matters to her." Weston stared at him, realizing for the first time that Tobias Montclair wasn't just a grieving father. He was a shark who had just smelled blood in the water. The Massachusetts General Hospital private suite was quiet, save for the beep of the cardiac monitor. Archer was asleep, sedated to help his airways relax. The doctors confirmed it had been a near-fatal exacerbation triggered by stress and abrupt oxygen deprivation. Tobias sat in a leather armchair in the corner of the room. He hadn't slept in 24 hours. His tie was undone, draped over the armrest. The table in front of him was covered in files that had been courier-delivered an hour ago. Weston Harrington paced the room, a coffee cup in hand. "Okay, situation report," Weston said. "The FBI interviewed you. They interviewed Adira Knight. God bless that woman. She gave a statement that completely contradicts Alina's. She saw Alina pull the tube. That's assault. Maybe reckless endangerment." "It's not enough," Tobias murmured, flipping through a dossier. "Not enough? Tobias, we can get the charges dropped against you and likely get a settlement. A big one." Tobias looked up. "I told you, Weston. I don't want a settlement. A settlement comes with an NDA. A settlement means she keeps her job, maybe gets transferred to a domestic route for a few months until the heat dies down. I want her license. I want her reputation. And I want the management that enabled her." Tobias tapped the file in front of him. "Look at this." Weston leaned over. It was Alina Moore's employment history, dug up by Tobias's team of private investigators overnight. "She's been with Horizon for 12 years, Tobias read. 3 citations for customer conflict, all dismissed by management. But look at the complainants." Weston squinted at the photos attached to the old complaints. An elderly Hispanic woman who was denied water for 3 hours. A young black mother whose baby formula was thrown away because the bottle was too large. A Sikh man who was forced to move seats because he made a pilot uncomfortable. "She has a pattern," Weston said. "She targets the vulnerable. People she thinks won't fight back." "Exactly," Tobias said. "She's a bully with wings. And Horizon Air protects her because she's the niece of Kinsley Hale." Weston choked on his coffee. "Kinsley Hale? The chief operating officer of Horizon Air?" "The very same," Tobias said, his eyes gleaming. "That's why she felt untouchable. That's why she smirked. She knew that no matter what she did to my son, her uncle would sweep it under the rug. She thinks the system is built for her. Tobias stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Boston skyline. She's right, isn't she? Weston asked. The system is built for people like her. Usually, Tobias said, but they made a critical error in calculation. Which is? They assumed I was just a passenger. Tobias turned back to the room. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Who are you calling? Weston asked. My broker, Tobias said. Horizon Air is a publicly traded company. Their stock took a hit this morning because of the bad press, but it's stabilizing because they released a statement blaming me. They think the news cycle will move on in 48 hours. And their quarterly shareholder meeting is in 3 days. In New York. Tobias smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I currently own 4% of Horizon Air through various shell companies. It's part of a diversified portfolio I haven't looked at in years. But as of this morning, I've instructed my firm to initiate a hostile acquisition of voting shares. I'm calling in favors from BlackRock and Vanguard. Weston stared at him, mouth slightly agape. You're going to crash the shareholder meeting? I'm not just going to crash it, Tobias said. I'm going to put Archer's face on the giant screen behind the CEO, and then I'm going to introduce them to the new majority owner. The door to the hospital room opened. Adira Knight peeked in. She looked tired, holding a bouquet of flowers. I didn't know if I should come, she said softly. But I wanted to check on the boy. Tobias softened instantly. He walked over and took her hand. Adira, you saved his life. You are always welcome here. Adira looked at Archer sleeping. Is he okay? He will be, Tobias said, physically. I saw the news, Adira said, anger flashing in her eyes. They're lying, Mr. Montclair. They're saying you were drunk. They're saying the boy was listening to loud music and refused to turn it off. I know, Tobias said. I recorded it, Adira said. The room went dead silent. Tobias and Weston froze. You what? Weston asked. Adira reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. I didn't get the beginning, but when she yanked the tube, I had my phone in my hand because I was texting my husband. I hit record right when she started screaming at you. She tapped the screen. The video played. The angle was low, from across the aisle, but the audio was crystal clear. Alina. I don't need to check anything. The sound of the machine stopping. Tobias. Turn it back on. Now. Alina. Don't you dare speak to me like that. The visual of her hand grabbing the tube. The violent yank. Archer's choking sound. Alina. He's faking it. I know his type. It was damning. It was brutal. It was undeniable proof of malice. Weston let out a long, low whistle. That is the smoking gun. We release this and she's done. Today. No, Tobias said, placing a hand over the phone. Adira looked confused. No, why? This proves everything. If we release it now, Tobias said, his mind working 10 steps ahead, Horizon Air will fire her immediately to save face. They'll issue a public apology, pay us a settlement, and claim she was a rogue employee. Kinsley Hale will keep his job. The culture that allowed this will remain. Tobias looked at the video again, watching the cruelty in Alina's face. We hold it, Tobias said. We let them lie. We let them dig their hole deeper. We let Kinsley Hale go on TV and defend her. We let them commit to their narrative. And then? Adira asked. And then, Tobias said, at the shareholder meeting, when they are standing on stage congratulating themselves on their safety record, we play it. Weston smiled. It was a wicked, shark-like smile. You want to nuke them. I want to burn it down, Tobias corrected, so that they can never hurt another child again. He looked at Adira. Adira, I need you to come to New York. Can you do that? Adira looked at the sleeping boy, then at the determined father. She nodded. For him, anything. Tobias turned back to the window. The rain had stopped. "Get ready, Alina," he whispered to the glass. "Your flight is about to get very bumpy." The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of Tobias's Manhattan penthouse, but inside, the atmosphere was dark. The 60-inch television mounted on the wall was tuned to a national morning news program. The headline Chiron screamed in bright red letters, "AR Rage, crew member assaulted by unruly passenger." On the screen, Alina Moore sat on a beige couch, looking remarkably different from the woman who had sneered at a dying boy just 48 hours ago. She wore a soft pastel cardigan. Her makeup was understated, designed to make her look pale and fragile. She held a tissue in her hand, dabbing at eyes that were dry but squinted in practiced distress. "It was terrifying," Alina told the sympathetic host. "I was just trying to follow safety protocols. The device was making a strange noise. It sounded like it was sparking. I was worried about a fire hazard. When I asked the gentleman to turn it off, he became violent." Tobias stood by the kitchen island, his coffee mug untouched. Beside him, Weston Harrington took notes on a legal pad, his jaw tight. "He lunged at me," Alina continued, her voice trembling. "He started screaming that I was killing his son. But the boy looked fine until the father started shouting. I think the father instructed him to act sick to get an upgrade. It's a common scam." The host nodded gravely. "And you were just doing your job, ensuring the safety of everyone on board?" "That's all I ever do," Alina sniffled. "I love my passengers. It breaks my heart that someone would accuse me of racism. I don't see color. I only see safety." Tobias picked up the remote and muted the TV. The silence that followed was heavy. "She's good," Weston admitted, though the words tasted like bile. "She's hitting every talking point: safety, victimhood, and the implicit bias. She's painting you as the angry black man without ever saying the words." "It's a script," Tobias said, his voice dangerously calm. "She didn't write that. Horizon Air's legal team did." "We need to respond," Weston said. "The court of public opinion is turning. The stock price is rebounding because investors think the airline is the victim here. If we wait until the meeting, it might be too late to sway the institutional voters." Tobias turned to look at Archer. The boy was sitting on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the city. He hadn't spoken much since they left the hospital. The trauma wasn't just physical. It was the realization that his life meant less to someone than a rule book. "No," Tobias said. "We don't interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. Let them build their castle on this lie. The higher they build it, the harder it falls." His phone buzzed. It was Adira Knight. "Tobias," she said, her voice shaking. "Are you watching this?" "I am," Tobias replied gently. "Don't let it get to you, Adira." "It's not just the TV," she said. "I just had 2 men in suits show up at my door. They said they were from Horizon Air's guest relations department." Tobias's grip on the phone tightened. "What did they say?" "They offered me a voucher," she said, sounding incredulous. "A voucher for $5,000 in travel credit and a confidentiality agreement. They said it was standard procedure for witnesses of traumatic events to ensure privacy." "They're trying to buy your silence," Tobias said. "I told them to get off my porch before I called the police," Adira said fiercely. "But Tobias, they mentioned my job. They asked if my employer knew I was involved in a federal investigation. It felt like a threat." "Adira, listen to me closely," Tobias said, his voice dropping an octave. "Do not speak to them again. If they come back, you call Weston. But this is good. This means they are scared. They know there's a witness, but they don't know about the video yet. They're fishing." "I'm not scared of them," Adira said, though her breathing was shallow. "I'm coming to New York tomorrow. I want to be there when you take them down." "You will be," Tobias promised. "I'll send a private car for you. You'll stay here with us. You're under my protection now." He hung up and looked at Weston. "They threatened Adira. Weston slammed his pen down. That's witness tampering. That's a felony. It's desperate, Tobias corrected. And it's Kinsley Hale's signature move. Intimidate the weak, crush the opposition. Tobias walked to his desk and opened his laptop. The screen displayed a complex web of financial data. The hostile takeover was in motion, but it was precarious. He had secured 12% of the voting shares through aggressive buying in the last 24 hours, costing him nearly $400 million. But he needed 51% to force a board recall, or at least enough to demand the floor at the meeting. He picked up his phone and dialed a number that very few people in the world had. Alexander, Tobias said when the line connected. Alexander Vane, the CEO of Vane Capital, and one of the largest institutional investors in the world, answered on the first ring. Tobias, I saw the news. Is it true? Was that your boy? It was, Tobias said. I'm sorry, Alexander said, and he meant it. What do you need? I need your proxy votes, Tobias said bluntly. Vane Capital holds 18% of Horizon Air. I need you to assign your voting rights to me for the shareholder meeting on Friday. There was a pause on the line. 18% was a massive amount of power to hand over. It was worth billions. Tobias, Alexander sighed. You know I don't get involved in personal vendettas. Horizon is a solid earner for us. If you destabilize the board, the stock drops, and my clients lose money. The stock is going to drop anyway, Tobias said. Because on Friday, I'm going to reveal that their COO and their lead flight attendant covered up the attempted negligent homicide of a minor. The brand toxicity will be nuclear. If you stand with them, you'll be covered in the fallout. If you stand with me, I'll install a new board that focuses on customer experience. The stock will rebound in 6 months higher than ever. Silence stretched across the line. Tobias waited. He was asking a friend to bet $1 billion on his word. You have proof? Alexander asked. Real proof? Not just he said, she said? I have a video, Tobias said. Clear as day. It shows malice. It shows the lie. Alexander exhaled. Okay, I'll have legal draw up the proxy assignment. But Tobias, if you miss, if you don't kill the king, you're going to lose a lot of money. I don't care about the money, Tobias said. Thursday afternoon, 24 hours before the shareholder meeting, Tobias and Weston sat in the plush conference room of Sterling Locke and Moore, the high-powered law firm representing Horizon Air. The air smelled of mahogany and intimidation. Across the table sat 3 lawyers. In the center was Marcus Sterling, a man known in legal circles as the Butcher. He had a smile that looked like it had been surgically applied. Mr. Montclair, Sterling began, smoothing his tie. Let me start by saying that Horizon Air deeply regrets the misunderstanding that occurred on Flight 402. Misunderstanding, Tobias repeated, his face unreadable. Is that the legal term for ripping a life support device off a child? Sterling didn't blink. We have statements from the crew indicating the device was malfunctioning. However, Horizon values every passenger. We want to make this right. He slid a folder across the table. Weston opened it. He scanned the document, his eyebrows raising slightly. $200,000, Weston read aloud, and a lifetime upgrade to platinum status. It's a generous offer, Sterling said. Considering your client's disruptive behavior contributed to the escalation. Tobias didn't look at the folder. He looked at Sterling. And the conditions? Standard, Sterling said, waving a hand dismissively. A non-disclosure agreement. A joint statement agreeing that both parties contributed to the incident. And, of course, a waiver of all future liability. And Alina Moore? Tobias asked. Ms. Moore has been placed on paid administrative leave for 1 week, Sterling said. She will undergo additional sensitivity training. We feel that is sufficient. Tobias laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Sensitivity training? For a woman who smirked while my son turned blue? Mr. Montclair, Sterling's voice hardened. Let's be realistic. You are a wealthy man, but you are not above the law. If you reject this, we will countersue for the cost of the diversion, the fuel, and the emotional distress of our crew. We will paint you as an erratic, abusive father. We will subpoena your son's medical records. We will drag this out for 5 years. Do you really want Archer to go through that? It was a threat, plain and simple. They were weaponizing the legal system to protect their bottom line. Tobias leaned forward. He placed his hands on the table, interlacing his fingers. You did your research on my finances, Tobias said softly. But you didn't do your research on me. Sterling looked confused. Excuse me? I don't want your money, Tobias said. I don't want your platinum status, and I certainly don't want your silence. He stood up. Weston closed the folder and slid it back. Mr. Sterling, Tobias said, please tell Kinsley Hale that I will see him tomorrow. The shareholder meeting is for investors only, Sterling snapped. Security will not let you in. Tobias smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had shown in days. I think you'll find I have a standing invitation. As they walked out of the building, Weston let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for an hour. That was risky, Weston said. They're going to double security. They might try to get a restraining order before tomorrow. Let them try, Tobias said. I just got the confirmation from Alexander. With his shares, plus my acquisition, plus the smaller blocks I picked up this morning, we have 34%. It's not 51%, but it's enough to block any major motion, and it's certainly enough to get me the microphone. 34% isn't a takeover, Weston warned. It's a standoff. I don't need a takeover to win, Tobias said. I just need the truth to be seen. Once the video plays, the other shareholders will turn. The pension funds, the ethical investment groups, they won't be able to back Hale. The board will fracture. They reached the waiting limousine. Adira was inside, looking nervous but resolved. Archer was there too, looking better, the color back in his cheeks. Did they offer the money? Adira asked. They did, Tobias said, sitting down. They offered 30 pieces of silver. And we declared war, Tobias said. He looked at Archer. Tomorrow, son, you're going to see what happens when bad people pick a fight with the wrong family. Archer looked at his father. Dad, are you sure about this? They said on TV that I was faking it. Maybe people will believe them. Tobias put a hand on Archer's knee. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. But tomorrow, the truth arrives in steel-toed boots. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of suits. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and self-importance. 500 people, investors, analysts, and press, filled the rows of chairs. At the front of the room, a massive stage was set up with a podium and a gigantic LED screen displaying the Horizon Air logo, a stylized bird soaring into a golden sunrise. The irony was not lost on Tobias. He stood at the back of the room, obscured by the shadows of the mezzanine. He, Weston, and Adira had entered through a service entrance, thanks to a hefty tip to the hotel's banquet manager. They weren't on the guest list, but they were in the building. Look at them, Adira whispered, pointing to the stage. Seated at a long table covered in blue velvet were the board of directors. In the center sat Kinsley Hale. He was a man in his 60s with silver hair and a tan that spoke of frequent trips to St. Bart's. He looked relaxed, chatting with the man to his right. To the side of the stage, in the VIP section, sat Alina Moore. She was the guest of honor, the face of their Safety First campaign. She was smiling, accepting handshakes from sycophantic junior executives. She's acting like she won a medal, Weston muttered. She thinks she has, Tobias said. Wait for it. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. Kinsley Hale walked to the podium. Applause rippled through the room. Polite, obligatory applause. "Welcome, partners," Hale's voice boomed, smooth and practiced. "This year has been a triumph for Horizon Air. We have expanded our routes, cut our fuel costs by 6%, and delivered record dividends." The screen behind him flashed green charts showing upward trends. "But more than profits," Hale continued, his face growing solemn. "We pride ourselves on our values: safety, integrity, resilience. Just this week, one of our finest crew members faced a threat in the skies, a threat that could have endangered hundreds. But because of her quick thinking, tragedy was averted." Hale gestured to Alina. "Alina, please stand." Alina stood up, feigning shyness. She waved. The applause grew louder. Ms. Moore faced an unruly passenger who refused to follow federal safety regulations, Hale said, his voice rising. "A passenger who used his own child as a prop to try and manipulate our crew. It was despicable, but Alina stood her ground. And let me be clear, Horizon Air will always stand with our crew against aggression." Tobias felt the anger radiating off Adira. She was shaking. "Ready?" Tobias asked her. "I'm ready," she whispered. "Weston?" "Let's go," the lawyer said, adjusting his cuffs. On stage, Hale was winding up. "We are moving into a new era of dominance, and nothing will stop us." "Mr. Chairman!" Tobias's voice wasn't a shout. It was a projection, trained and powerful, cutting through the amplified audio of the room. Hale stopped. He squinted into the darkness of the hall. "Who is that? This is a private meeting." Tobias stepped out of the shadows and began walking down the center aisle. The spotlight swung around, searching for him, and finally landed on the trio. Tobias in the center, impeccable in a navy suit. Weston to his left, carrying a briefcase. Adira to his right, head held high. A murmur went through the crowd. People recognized him from the news. "Security!" Hale barked into the microphone. "Remove him!" Two large security guards stepped into the aisle, blocking Tobias's path. "I wouldn't do that," Weston said loudly, holding up a document. "My client is a registered shareholder with floor rights. Interfering with a shareholder at an annual meeting is a violation of SEC Rule 14A8. You touch him, you go to federal prison." The guards hesitated. They looked at Hale. "He's a disruptor," Hale shouted, losing his cool. "He owns nothing." "Actually," Tobias said, his voice calm as he continued walking, the guards parting like the Red Sea, "I own 34% of this company." The room gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the ballroom. Hale froze. That's impossible." "Check your tablets," Tobias said, reaching the front row. He didn't look at Hale. He looked at the board members behind him. "Vane Capital, BlackRock Proxies, and my own holding company, Aegis Logistics. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I am the single largest voting bloc in this room." He stopped at the foot of the stage. He looked up at Kinsley Hale, who was now gripping the podium so hard, his knuckles were white. "You have the floor, Mr. Montclair," a board member, an elderly woman who looked terrified, stammered. "Thank you," Tobias said. He turned to face the audience. He didn't use a microphone. He didn't need one. "My name is Tobias Montclair," he said. "And I am the father of the boy you just slandered." Alina Moore had stopped smiling. She had sunk into her chair, her eyes darting around for an exit. "Mr. Hale told you a story about safety," Tobias said, pacing slowly. "He told you a story about a hero. I'd like to tell you a different story. A story about a 16-year-old artist named Archer." "Cut his mic!" Hale hissed to the sound technician. "I'm not using your mic, Kinsley," Tobias said without looking back. "And you can't cut the truth. This is a boardroom, not a theater," Hale yelled. "State your motion or sit down." "My motion," Tobias said, turning back to the stage, "is a vote of no confidence in the chief operating officer, and a motion to terminate the employment of Alina Moore for gross negligence and assault." "Denied!" Hale shouted. Based on what grounds? Your word against hers? Tobias smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who had cornered the sheep. Weston, Tobias said. Weston opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. He connected it wirelessly to the presentation system. The tech crew, confused and likely terrified of the man who just claimed to own the company, didn't block the signal. The giant LED screen behind Hale flickered. The stock charts disappeared. "No," Alina whispered. She stood up. "No." "Based on this grounds," Tobias said. He pressed play on his phone. The video appeared on the massive screen, 50 feet high. The audio boomed through the concert-grade speakers, the whir of the machine, Alina's sneer, "I don't need to check anything," the yank, the sound of Archer choking, the terrifying wet gasp of a boy fighting for air, Alina's voice clear and cruel. "He's faking it. I know his type." The room was dead silent. The only sound was the video playing the loop of Alina ripping the tube. Tobias let it play 3 times. Then he paused it on the frame of Alina holding the tubing, her face twisted in contempt. He turned to the audience. 500 faces stared back, horrified. The investors weren't looking at the stock price anymore. They were looking at a child being tortured. "This," Tobias said, pointing to the giant screen, "is your safety first. This is the woman you just applauded." He turned to Hale. "And this," Tobias said, pointing to the CEO, "is the man who spent $1 million of your money to cover it up." Alina Moore burst into tears. Real tears this time. She ran off the stage, knocking over her chair. Kinsley Hale stood at the podium, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He looked at the board members. They were all distancing themselves, sliding their chairs away from him. Tobias climbed the stairs to the stage. He walked over to the podium. Hale, defeated, shrank back. Tobias leaned into the microphone. "Now," he said, his voice echoing through the hall, "let's talk about the future of my airline." The silence in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel didn't last. It was broken not by a gavel, but by a sob. It came from the back of the room, then another, until the shock morphed into a low, rumbling growl of collective outrage. 500 of the world's wealthiest investors, people who cared about margins and dividends, had just seen a line crossed that no amount of profit could justify. On the giant LED screen, the frozen image of Alina Moore's sneering face loomed over them like a gargoyle, a testament to the cruelty lurking behind the corporate veil. Kinsley Hale, the man who had spent 40 years building an empire on the philosophy that the customer is a wallet to be emptied, looked out at the sea of faces and saw his career disintegrating. He gripped the podium, his knuckles white, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. This is out of context," Hale stammered into the microphone, his voice cracking. "We don't know what happened before the video started. Mr. Montclair is manipulating you." "The only thing being manipulated here is the truth," Tobias said, his voice calm, amplified by the acoustics of the room. He stood at the base of the stairs, looking up at the board members. "You have a choice. You can stand with the man who covered up the torture of a child, or you can stand with the future." The elderly board member who had spoken earlier, a woman named Margaret Vance, slowly stood up. She looked at Hale with unparalleled disgust. "Kinsley," she said, her voice shaking with fury, "you told us the boy was violent. You told us the father was drunk. You lied to the board." "I protected the company," Hale screamed, losing his composure entirely. "I did what I had to do to stop the stock from tanking, and you all profited from it." "We profited from a lie," Margaret said. She turned to the rest of the table. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in the CEO and the COO, and I move to strip Kinsley Hale of all executive powers effective this second." "Seconded," said the man to her right. "Seconded," said another. One by one, the hands went up. Every single board member turned their back on the king of Horizon Air. Hale watched them, his eyes wide. He looked for Alina, his niece, his protégée. She was huddled in the corner of the stage, weeping into her hands, abandoned by the sycophants who had praised her 10 minutes ago. "You can't do this," Hale roared. "I built this. I am Horizon Air." "Not anymore," Tobias said. He turned to the back of the room and nodded. The double doors at the rear of the ballroom burst open. 4 officers from the NYPD entered, followed by 2 agents in FBI windbreakers. They marched down the aisle, the sound of their heavy boots echoing against the marble floor. The investors parted to let them through. The air in the room was electric. The lead FBI agent walked up the stairs to the stage. He didn't look at Tobias. He went straight to Alina Moore. "Alina Moore," the agent said, his voice carrying to the back row. "You are under arrest for federal assault, interference with a flight crew member resulting in bodily injury, and reckless endangerment of a minor." Alina screamed as the handcuffs clicked onto her wrists. "I was doing my job. My uncle told me to do it. He said to be tough." She was pointing at Hale now, throwing him to the wolves to save herself. "He told me to get rid of the problem passengers. He said he'd protect me." The agent turned to Hale. "Kinsley Hale." Hale straightened his tie, trying to muster some shred of dignity. "I have the best lawyers in New York. You have no grounds." "We have the video," the agent said dryly. "And now we have a witness testimony from your co-conspirator implicating you in a federal cover-up. You have the right to remain silent, Mr. Hale. I suggest you start using it." As the handcuffs were placed on Hale, the room erupted. Not in applause, but in the frantic noise of 100 phone calls being made. The stock was plummeting, and the sharks were feeding. Tobias walked up the stairs. He stood next to the empty podium. He looked at Hale being dragged away, then at Alina, who was sobbing hysterically as she was led out. He felt no joy, no triumph, just a cold, hard resolution. He turned to the microphone. The room quieted down, waiting to hear from the man who had just decapitated the leadership in under 20 minutes. "My name is Tobias Montclair," he repeated, "and as of this moment, I am the interim chairman of the board. This meeting is adjourned, but the work has just begun." He walked off the stage, past the stunned board members, and down to where Archer was waiting. Archer looked at his father, his eyes wide. "You actually did it." "We did it," Tobias corrected. He put an arm around his son. "Now let's go get some dinner. I believe we have a victory to celebrate." The week following the shareholder meeting was described by the Wall Street Journal as the Great Purge of Horizon Air. Tobias didn't just fire people, he excised the rot. He set up a temporary office in the headquarters, and for 12 hours a day, he conducted interviews. He fired the entire legal team that had threatened him. He fired the VP of Customer Relations who had tried to bribe Adira. He fired the HR director who had ignored the previous complaints against Alina. But he also found the light. He found the junior flight attendant, the young girl on the plane who had handed Weston the oxygen tank despite Alina's glare. Her name was Sarah. Tobias promoted her to head of in-flight training. "Teach them empathy," Tobias told her. "Teach them that a rule book is a guide, not a god. And if you ever see someone suffering, you help them. I don't care what the policy says." Then there was the matter of Adira Knight. Adira had returned to her job as a nurse in Boston, trying to avoid the media storm. But Tobias hadn't forgotten her. 2 weeks after the meeting, a black town car pulled up to her modest house. Weston Harrington stepped out, holding a thick envelope. "Mr. Harrington," Adira said, wiping her hands on her apron as she answered the door. "Is everything okay? Do I need to testify again?" "The legal part is over, Adira," Weston smiled. "Alina pled guilty this morning. Her lawyer knew the video was a death sentence in court. She's looking at 3 to 5 years in federal prison. Hale is fighting, but he'll lose. He'll likely spend the rest of his life in minimum security." Adira let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for a month. Thank God. It's finally over. Not quite, Weston said. He handed her the envelope. Tobias wanted you to have this. Adira opened it. Inside was a check. She looked at the number, and her knees went weak. She had to grab the doorframe to stop from falling. $1 million, she whispered. I can't take this. It's not a gift, Weston said gently. It's a retainer. For what? Tobias is creating a new division within the airline, Weston explained. The Passenger Advocacy Board. It's an independent body with the power to veto any policy that endangers human dignity. He wants you to run it. Adira looked at the check, then at Weston. I'm just a nurse. You're the woman who stood up when everyone else looked away, Weston said. That makes you more qualified than any executive in that building. The salary is separate. This check? This is just back pay for the stress we put you through. Tears streamed down Adira's face. Tell him yes. Tell him I'll start Monday. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings against Alina Moore were swift and brutal. Stripped of her uncle's protection and Horizon's legal fund, she was just another criminal defendant. The judge, a stern woman who had seen the video, showed no leniency. Ms. Moore, the judge said at the sentencing, you were in a position of trust at 30,000 feet. You turned an aircraft cabin into a torture chamber because of your own ego and prejudice. You are not a victim. You are a bully who finally met someone she couldn't intimidate. Alina was sentenced to 48 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She was permanently placed on the violent offender no-fly list. She would never step foot on an airplane again. As she was led out of the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, she looked into the gallery. Tobias was there. He wasn't smiling. He just watched her, his face impassive. She paused, looking like she wanted to say something. Maybe an apology, maybe a curse. But the bailiff nudged her forward, and she vanished through the side door. Tobias stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked out into the sunlight, 1 year later. The rebranding of Horizon Air was complete. The logo was different, softer, warmer. But the biggest change was on the inside. The culture of fear was gone. The flight attendants smiled because they were treated with respect, and they passed that respect on to the passengers. Tobias sat in seat 1A of the new flagship Airbus A350. Next to him was Archer. Archer was 17 now. He looked older, more confident. The sketchbook was still on his lap, but he wasn't hiding behind headphones anymore. Nervous? Tobias asked. A little, Archer admitted. It's a big gallery, Tate Modern. Your work is good enough, Tobias said. It deserves to be there. The flight attendant approached. It wasn't Alina, obviously. It was a young man named David. He noticed the portable oxygen concentrator tucked under Archer's seat, the same model, but now with a bright green tag on it that read, medically cleared, do not touch. Good morning, Mr. Montclair, Mr. Lennox, David said with a genuine smile. I see you have your medical equipment. Can I get you any distilled water for a humidifier, or maybe an extra pillow for back support? Archer smiled. I'm good, thank you. Just let me know, David said. We're glad to have you aboard. As the plane taxied, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Flight 101 to London. Before we take off, I want to remind you that your safety and your dignity are our highest priorities. If you need anything, our crew is here to help. We look out for each other up here. Archer looked out the window as the plane accelerated. The force pressed him back into the seat. He took a deep breath, a full, easy breath. It feels different, Archer said. It is different, Tobias replied. We made it different. They landed in London and went straight to the exhibition. The gallery was crowded. Critics, buyers, and art lovers mingled with champagne glasses. Archer's collection was in the main hall. It was a series of charcoal sketches titled Breathless. The images were haunting. A hand gripping a plastic tube, a blurred face screaming in silence, a view of clouds seen through tear-filled eyes. But the final piece was different. It was a large canvas, splashed with color. It showed a hand reaching down to pull another hand up. It was titled The Oxygen of Justice. Tobias stood in front of it, feeling a lump in his throat. "It's beautiful, son," he said. "It's us," Archer said. He looked at his father. "You saved me, Dad, and not just on the plane. You saved me by showing me that we don't have to take it. We can fight back." Tobias put his arm around Archer's shoulder. "We didn't just fight for us, Archer. We fought for every person who has ever been told they don't matter. We fought for the next kid with an inhaler, the next mother with a crying baby. We fought to remind them that dignity isn't a perk of first class. It's a human right." A flashbulb popped. A reporter from the London Times approached. "Mr. Montclair," the reporter asked, "the turnaround of Horizon Air is being called the greatest corporate redemption story of the decade. Do you feel vindicated?" Tobias looked at the reporter, then at Archer, then at the painting. "Vindication is a small word," Tobias said. "What I feel is relief. Relief that the skies are a little safer today than they were yesterday. But make no mistake, we are always watching. The moment they forget, the moment they put profit over people again, I'll be there." He turned back to his son. "Come on, let's go get some ice cream. I hear London has a great spot near the river." Archer laughed. "Dad, it's 40 degrees out." "I'm the chairman," Tobias grinned. "I say it's ice cream weather." They walked out of the gallery together, stepping into the cool London evening, breathing the air, free and unafraid. The story of Tobias and Archer isn't just about a bad flight. It's about the systemic arrogance that allows cruelty to flourish when unchecked. It's a reminder that sometimes the only thing standing between a bully and a victim is the courage of one person to say no. Tobias Montclair didn't just use his money. He used his voice, his leverage, and his love for his son to dismantle a corrupt machine. Kinsley Hale and Alina Moore thought they were untouchable because they controlled the altitude. They forgot that gravity applies to everyone. If this story moved you, if you believe that justice should be served cold and complete, please hit that like button. It helps us share these stories with more people. And if you want to see more stories where the underdog bites back and karma delivers the ultimate knockout, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that even the biggest giants can fall if you hit them in the knees. Thanks for watching, and remember, never apologize for demanding the air you breathe.